and welcome to the Palm Beach County Board of County Commissioners workshop for May 23rd, 2023. And may we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Baxter,
Here.
Commissioner Bernard,
Here.
Commissioner Marino,
Here.
Vice Mayor Sachs, Mayor Weiss,
Here.
Commissioner Woodward.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Baxter is going to lead us in our invocation and Pledge of Allegiance. If you're able to, please rise.
If you would please bow your heads. Before we begin our business at hand, let us ask and give voice to our sincere gratitude to the divine for allowing us to reach this day with the abundant blessings that our great community has been bestowed. Let us pray that with sacred guidance from the Almighty for our decision making, we may continue to work for the betterment of all. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning.
All right. Are there any additions, deletions, or substitutions to our agenda this morning, Administrator?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, there are no additions, deletions, or substitutions this morning.
Thank you. With that, may we have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? We have a motion by Commissioner Barnett, a second by Commissioner Marino. All in favor, all opposed. That motion carries 7-0. All right, moving on to our regular agenda, which can be found on the second page of your agenda. We have two items for approval, 3A, 1, and 2. We have a motion to receive and file and to approve contracts and claim settlements list as submitted by various departments. So that's 3A, 1, and 2 by Commissioner Marino, a second by the Vice Mayor. All in favor, all opposed. That motion carries 7-0. Okay. Moving on. Okay, before we start our workshop, I would like to take a moment of personal privilege. Recently, there was a significant cleanup that was done in District 2. We have some folks here that were involved with it, but the best way to tell this story is with a video that we have ready to go. So, Lester, can you roll the video, please?
On Monday, May 8th, more than 40,000 pounds of trash was removed from the 6800 block of Wallace Road in West Palm Beach. The trash included 84 tractor-trailer tires, 280 gallons of used motor oil, over 30 used oil filters, and other types of garbage. This illegal dumping site was cleared by a multi-agency task force comprised of PBSO corrections inmates and staff from the PBSO Environmental Crimes Unit, Palm Beach County Code Enforcement, Palm Beach County Road and Bridges Department, and the Solid Waste Authority. Most of these locations are away from populated areas or have slow vehicle and foot traffic, which emphasizes the need to report a suspected illegal dumping site to the appropriate agency.
From the very beginning, we elicited some assistance from the neighboring businesses, and they were very cooperative. They don't want the debris junking up their areas either, so we asked them also if they see something, say something.
Illegal dumping sites like Wallace Road are the result of individuals and companies trying to avoid the cost of proper waste disposal. Some of the devastating effects from this type of waste are soil and wildlife contamination, water pollution, and threats to public health.
The major goal, though, is education. Even when we find a violator, it is better that we educate them as to the proper way to dispose of these items, which in most cases is very minimal charge for the proper disposal. Citizens and business owners can do their part by calling in suspicious illegal dumping activity. If you live in a municipality, please call your local law enforcement. If you live in an area that Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office provides service, please call the Sheriff's Office at 561-688-3000. You can also call Solid Waste Authority directly at 866-792-4636.
So you can see that illegal dumping, the impact it has is tremendous, not only from the environmental damage that it does, but also it's costly for our community as well. And I want to acknowledge the folks involved. This was a multi-agency effort from PBSO, Environmental Crimes Unit, and bringing in their inmates to help with the cleanup. Palm Beach County Road and Bridge, Palm Beach County Code Enforcement, and the Solid Waste Authority, all working together to clean this mess up. Just to reiterate, there was over 40,000 pounds of garbage picked up. There were 84 tractor-trailer tires, 280 gallons of used motor oil that they collected, and 30 used oil filters. The other thing that was noted was they were dumping the oil and other fluids onto the ground. And there are people who live not too far away from some of these locations that are on well water. And so the impact to them and the businesses around there. So it's really important that we, when something happens, that people report it so that it can be dealt with as quickly as possible before it does any more damage. But this was an amazing effort by all of you, and the folks that helped coordinate this are here today, and I just wanted to bring them in and acknowledge them and thank them for their efforts working together to help make Palm Beach County a much better place for us all to live. So thank you for being here and for your efforts, and that deserves a round of applause. If you don't mind, I'll take a minute. I'd like to take a picture with these gentlemen and men and women. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's not me, right? Very much. All right.
Yeah, it's not the District 5 now. Yeah, who do I contact? Where's Virginia?
Yeah, tall people are.
Virginia?
I'm here.
Yes.
Just saying.
Yeah.
2, 1.
All right, good. Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sachs. Bernard.
I got sent to the other side today.
That one in, you get this one?
Thank you.
You got to the left side.
All right.
I think with the wastebasket, that's where we're supposed to be.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, if you see something, say something and make sure we report that. All right. Moving along into our workshop agenda, as we've been working on, is that we don't have a specific time for any of the items. So we'll move through them as quickly as we can. If we need to take a lunch break at some point, we'll certainly do so. And we're going to, moving on to item 4A, our Live Local Act. And we're going to get an update from administration. And I see our property appraiser, Dorothy Jacks, is here. Welcome, Ms. Jacks, or Mrs. Jacks, or
Ms. Jacks.
Ms. Jacks.
Ms. Jacks.
However,
Is he, she, or?
don't get me in trouble.
It'll be in 20 minutes. then.
Okay. Yes, of course. Mr. Rudder and Ms. Miller,
Good morning.
you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good morning to our commissioners and also our administrator. So as the mayor outlined, we'll be making a presentation on the Live Local Act. As you know, this Live Local Act is Senate Bill 102. It was signed by the governor in March of 2023, and this act becomes effective July 1 of 2023. July 1, 2023. Just as a background information, shortly after this bill was signed into law, our legislative team, specifically Todd and Ed, provided an overview to the board. And that was in April. Since that time, we, staff, we have been researching. We have read the act several times. We have done a lot of research. We have had internal debates. And we've also had multiple meetings with our administrator, who has peppered us with too many questions, okay? So today, what we'll be doing is presenting three specific areas of the bill. And we're looking at it in terms of the applicability to Palm Beach County and the impacts on the existing policies that we have in place. So the three specific areas that we'll be delving in are property tax exemptions, and we have the property appraiser with us. As you know, there are two mandatory tax exemption and one optional. So we are honored to have our property appraiser. I refer to her as our illustrious Dorothy Jacks, and she's here with her deputy Cecil. We also have the second aspect of it, will be the funding and tax credits. This is merely relative to the Sadowski Act and SAIL and other funding for housing. And that will be presented by Jonathan Brown, our Director of Housing and Economic Development. And we also have with us Sherry Howard, who has been part of the debate team on this act. So we thank her. We also have Patrick with us, and Patrick and his planning and zoning team with the interim director, Whitney Carroll, will be presenting the zoning and land development aspects, which will be very intense because a lot of complications there. And so we'll also be having some musical chair here where after the first two areas are presented, we will bring up the planning team. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dorothy, who will be speaking about property tax exemptions, talking about the lay of the land, what exists right now, and the impacts on the new exemptions. So Dorothy, here you go.
Good. Well, thank you very much, and good morning. I don't know that I've ever sat in this row, so
Yeah.
I need to get used to the space. But just to begin, when this bill passed, Ms. Baker and I were in touch about it almost immediately because it is so comprehensive. And again, our part of the bill is really the first portion, and which is what I'll be talking about. But just for some context, it's a 95-page bill. Now, the legislature does often put out some pretty long things, but this is pretty long. And I would say that on every page there is quite a bit of information to digest. And so all of us who are involved with reading it and understanding it and trying to interpret it for Palm Beach County, I'll just preface it by saying that we're still learning as we read it and read it again and read it again. I do want to just quickly introduce Cecil Jackson to my right. Cecil is my chief appraiser. He joined me from North Carolina last summer, and he's, we're putting him in feet first. He's also going to, he's worked on the tax roll for this year, and I will be back in a couple of weeks to give you a presentation on the new numbers for 2023. But I'm excited to have him, and he's been also reading this bill as it will have some impact on valuation processes for these properties moving forward as they start being approved and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about exemptions on affordable housing. I think it's important to begin by talking about what exists now in this realm. A lot has been said about Live Local, but there is already quite a bit of affordable housing in place in the law, that has been in the law for many, many, many years. And I'm going to go over those categories so you know what you're already, if you will, what is already being granted in Palm Beach County in the way of exemption, property tax exemption to affordable housing. First of all, we have two categories of affordable housing. We call them nonprofit and for-profit. Nonprofit implying that the owner of the properties are obviously not-for-profit agencies. Many of these agencies you would be very familiar with: Habitat for Humanity, Adopt a Family, the Renaissance Partnership, numerous faith-based organizations. All are currently owning and, in many cases, operating not-for-profit housing. These organizations have to apply for this exemption, and once they've initially applied, providing their not-for-profit status to our office, usually a 501c3, or they then can qualify if they are housing people who meet the various income criterias for affordability. Once that occurs the first year, every year thereafter, they have to again reapply, or not, I wouldn't call it a reapplication. They have to provide us with ongoing information about their clients, about who are living in their affordable housing, making sure again that they still remain within the income thresholds, et cetera, et cetera. So there are many of these agencies that are now, providing rental situations for people who need affordable housing. In addition to that, we have the Community Land Trust, or CLT, properties. Now, a CLT is where, and there are a number of iterations of this, so it's not all one size fits all. There is a number of different ways, but the concept is the Community Land Trust organization holds the land, but builds or provides a accommodation, a building on the property, which at some point can, if this is their model, they can transfer it to the owner of the property, an owner, an individual, a person who is qualified, and then the owner owns the property. They own the building, and they also have a long-term lease, usually with the CLT agency that controls the land. In those cases, we are allowing that homeowner to apply for homestead exemption because, of course, they have a home. The distinction is that their value is kept artificially low because the land is not included, as it were, in the valuation of the whole property. So whereas most of us, if we own our homes, our land and our building are both valued by our office, but the land is usually the significant indicator of value increase because of location, most likely, or size, any number of other factors. But in this case, with a CLT property, the property owner does not ever pay a big increase in property taxes because they're only paying on their structure. And then once they homestead, which is the intention of most of these properties, they're able to, of course, qualify for homestead, which controls the increase on their improvement to 3% a year, just like the rest of us who have homestead. And then there's restrictions on that they can't resell unless it's to somebody else who's in the program, or after a number of years, they get to obtain the ownership of both land and building. Again, each CLT is slightly different in how they can do it, but that is the core concept. We have 277 CLT homes in Palm Beach County, so that is where the property has transferred, the improvement has transferred to an owner, and the owner is living there, and the CLT land is effectively exempt from being taxed. So, in addition to those 277, we have over, and I don't have the value of it, but in the nonprofit sector, so Habitat, Renaissance Partners, Adopt a Family, many faith-based organizations, we have $147 million exempted right now okay? I will note that a lot of that, some of that, let's talk about the habitat example. We grant an exemption to habitat on the property it owns while it is in process of building a structure. So its whole model is it takes sometimes it's donated, sometimes they purchase. They take a piece of land, they then build a house. So during the process when it's being built, they get a tax exemption on the land. Then, of course, they will turn over the house to the owner, and then it goes back on the tax roll in the case of habitat. Okay, with the CLTs, it goes back on the tax roll. However, it, again, has a lower value going forward, and the land is exempt. So that is the current standing of the not-for-profit exemptions that exist in Palm Beach County. There are multifamily projects in this category. It's not all single-family homes. Some of them are towers. Some of them are apartment buildings, 2-story, 3-story. Various different types of residential property fall under this. And again, every year, the applicant, the owner, does resubmit to us information about the qualifications of the residents for the exemption. So there's no issues of somebody getting it that shouldn't. Now, let's move to the second category of affordable housing that exists currently in Palm Beach County, and that is what we call for-profit affordable housing. So, there has existed for some time under 196-1978, which is the same statute where they have made the changes for Live Local. There has existed the ability for for-profit organizations to receive a affordable housing exemption. These organizations have to, in the past, up until the recent changes, have had to meet two pretty significant criteria beyond the criteria that all of the people who they qualify to live in these properties are meeting the affordability standards. But they have also been required to have a LURA, which is a land use residential agreement, which they receive from the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So they've gone through a process to become, as it were, certified to build low-income housing. And then also, until this law change, have had to wait 15 years before qualifying for a property tax exemption. So they had to operate this affordable housing for 15 years, and then on year 16, they can apply for a property tax exemption. That is going to change with Live Local. The 15-year requirement is being pulled out of the statute, as is the requirement that they have a LURA, a land use residential agreement. The in this category of the for-profit housing organizations, you probably wouldn't recognize as many of the names. Certainly many of them are LLCs that own the property. Not all of them are getting 100% exemption. It may be that only a certain amount of their structure or their building is affordable, so that's who's getting the exemption, a percentage of the structure, and so forth. But to give you, again, I wanted to be able to paint a picture of where we are today. There is, in that category, and these are 2022 values, $400 million worth of exemption. $400 million. Now, my data, certainly, we have provided it to Ms. Baker's office, but we're more than happy, obviously, to give it to you all. It gets updated, it will be updated in July with the 2023 values. These are, of course, our 2022 values because we haven't yet certified the tax roll. But between the two categories today, there is about 450, I'm sorry, there's a little over $500 million in property tax exemption being provided in the affordable housing realm. I think it's important that you're aware of that because Live Local sort of sounds like it's brand new. But in actuality, a lot of what is going on has been going on for a long time in Palm Beach County, and we've been lucky to be able to provide this sort of benefit on the property tax side to these organizations under the current law. What Live Local does in our sphere, at least in today's, looking at it and then looking at it again and so forth, again, it frees up some of the requirements under the for-profit section to allow for not having to go through this 15-year wait. It will also allow not-for-profits not to have to get the LORA from the state. They'll have to meet other requirements. And again, all of this housing is based on that they can prove that their tenants are meeting the affordability standards, the income standards. And just to reassure you, that comes to our office again every year. We get masses of data from all of these owners, providing us with their rent rolls, providing us with their tenant lists, and the affidavits from their tenants about their income status, et cetera, et cetera. So we are checking and double checking each year to make sure that they are continuing to be qualified for these two current processes. So I want to just mention that there are, of course, There are, of course, other exemptions that exist on the books that we all are qualified for. Some of them are income limited. But, of course, homestead exemption exists. Secondary homestead exemption exists. So that's about an $800 tax savings annually to everybody. Then there's the cap, which I don't think you could say is an affordability thing because chances are value isn't increasing in lower leveled properties as much as it is in higher level properties, but certainly it's a nice benefit. If you are a low income senior in Palm Beach County, you can, meaning your income is below $30,000 a year approximately. It moves slightly every year, but you can also qualify for an additional low-income seniors exemption, so over age 65, under that income threshold. We have a lot of people that apply for that. It's about another $200 to $300 savings a year. We have about 16,000 residents that qualify for that. We also have benefits for disabled people who are in wheelchairs, who are blind. People also, hemiplegics and paraplegics get a complete exemption. There are benefits for disabled veterans, percentage disability based on their percent disabled. So if you're 30% disabled and you're a senior, you get a 30% exemption on your property taxes. So we do have a lot of people who qualify for that as well. So those are all additional benefits that exist for everybody, not just in this sphere, but I wanted to mention them. If you were an owner of a CLT property and you were qualified under any of those, you would of course get that additional benefit as well because you do own your property if you are in a CLT home. So I know we haven't moved through our slides very well, Dorrit, but maybe we could go to slide.
The first one.
Yeah. This sort of outlines some of the things I've already covered that exist now, but also this new change about nonprofit land use for affordable housing with a 99-year ground lease. That's basically, I think, something where if a developer wants to purchase land to use for nonprofit housing and they go through a process of having a nonprofit own it and operate it, then it will qualify. Quite honestly, I think this probably could occur today under the current law if they were careful just about how it's managed, but I don't think that is going to create any huge problems with the tax roll or with additional value. If you can go on, Dorrit, to the yeah, and this is also similarly what I just discussed. So much of what is in the law now and what is probably maybe adjusting a little is these percentages which again, we will get to and look at as we get those applications in. And then the third one, if you could. So I did want to mention this. Live Local has a provision for you to create another exemption, which is a new, not existing now, property tax exemption. I would like to suggest to you that certainly you're welcome to read this. We have read this and read this and read this and read this, and we are again still wrapping our heads around how the changes that have been made in Live Local affect what we have now. So I'd like to suggest that if you are thinking about this, certainly this is completely in your purview, we might wait on this until we can wrap our heads around the rest of it. Do remember that if it's a local option, it is only to your millage rate. So if you were to adopt it, it would be on the four something mills that you levy. It would not be on the city millages or the school board or anything else. So the substantial impact of it is not as great necessarily. I always like to mention that because every agent, so if you were in the city of West Palm Beach, you would still pay the West Palm Beach millage, you'd pay the school, you'd pay the water management, you'd pay all the other special districts. The only millage you wouldn't pay is the county. That's unless the city of West Palm adopts it, and all other 38 cities. So I'd like to suggest we just wait on this until we can understand it a little bit more and see if there is a need for it. But certainly that's up to you. I would just say that right now we have a really good program in Palm Beach County with what I think is a fairly reasonable amount of affordability tax exemptions taking place. I'd be happy to answer some questions if you have any for us.
Commissioner Marino and then Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Excuse me. Actually, I did have a couple questions, and you actually answered one sort of. To me, this is an accounting nightmare, and I just wanted to know who's doing the accounting. You said yearly they have to supply you with something, and it seems to me as this grows, this unfunded mandate grows, we have more and more responsibility, and is there an additional cost to the property appraiser? Is there a new person that needs to be brought on? Who gets trained in compliance? I mean, these are all nitty-gritty questions, but is there an answer, or is it a discussion?
Well, certainly we could foresee that over the next 5 years, we might have to add additional staff to assist with this job of policing, if you will, or reviewing the applications and making sure everybody has met their criteria. But I don't see that happening in the short term. New applications, or whether this becomes something that property owners will want to pursue, given there is a lot of structure around it, we'll have to sort of wait and see how much more is added. As you can tell, we're already managing quite a bit, and we have great staff that do that, and every year the same folks are reviewing this data, and we have multiple people who kind of do the backup and make sure that all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, like with so much else that we do. And so at this moment, I think we're fine. I suspect what we'll have to do is move some resources around to assist our point person on this project if the number that are applying for it grows substantially. I think later on in the presentation, I know that Dorit, I know you'll be talking about the zoning issues around this. We have discussed within our office, Cecil has recognized that there may be some issues around valuation should spot zoning start occurring, which I think effectively we can call it that. I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but if the zoning in an area, we're able to value an area based on its zoning, and if the property use of a particular piece of land in a particular zoned area changes, it does present a valuation challenge to us, because then and this is something which possibly the state will give us some guidance on moving forward as to whether we then value that property as value in use, or we continue to value it as its highest and best, which was as, let's say, warehouse, and now it's become residential. So there's a lot of questions around that. But again, it's sort of one of these things where I think we have to wait and see if it happens, and then by then we will hopefully have a little bit more guidance on how to manage that rather interesting appraisal challenge.
And then the property tax exemption optional slide. I go for the yes. I think we wait a year to see what shakes out, because I think there's going to be a lot of people with growing pains through this whole process. But there is your third bullet. It says applies to new and existing developments, which means existing developments could go back now and get a tax exemption, which can you explain that?
Well, certainly a lot of affordable housing is existing. If you think about it, it's built. It's just converts from one use to maybe an affordable use, residential property, single-family homes, if adoptive family buys them, and then it becomes affordable. So I think that's what is implied by existing.
And so then those would then come off the tax roll.
The millage for Palm Beach County would be eliminated for those properties. They would no longer pay a millage to Palm Beach County if you were to adopt it.
Okay, so for clarification, we were all scared into any new units that get built under this are going to have either 75% exemption of taxes or 100% exemption of taxes, depending on what your income bracket was. So what you're saying is that actual tax exemption is optional at this point. So if somebody builds a development right now and they have affordable housing in it, they're still going to be paying taxes.
I think the answer to that is it depends. If they qualify for the two current existing for-profit and not-for-profit options, then they will get the exemption. And let's remember—
that we already have in place.
Exactly. Okay. And on those exemptions, it's 100% of the millage rates. So it may not be 100% of the property value. It might be 75% or 50% or whatever it is that they qualify for, but it's the entire millage rates for you and for the schools and for everything else. Only under this optional, which I think is meant to kind of try to collect income types that are not covered by the others. Only under this would it be, you would have to adopt it, and then all the cities would have to adopt it for it to have any significant impact.
Okay, thank you very much.
Commissioner Woodward, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I thank you for the presentation. I actually have two questions. One being on the for-profit that currently exists right now. You said they have to have it for 15 years. Do we happen to know how many are in the pipeline for that are going to drop immediately? Okay.
Great question. We don't, because of course they've yet to make application. However, the new law, the changes that have been made in 196, 1978 that Live Local has done, is allowing for a form of a grandfathering in. So if you have a LoRa and is it a 5-year look back? I think it's a 5-year look back that would allow people who are in this in between to qualify under the new or qualify under the old, So I think there is some allowance to help anybody who's in that 15 years, but we have no way of knowing until they contact us.
So typically they're not applying until closer to the 15-year mark?
Oh, yeah, no, they don't until, yeah.
Okay, so it brings me to my second concern, I guess, with this. Since the LoRa is no longer part of this, I hesitate to even bring it up, but what are we looking at for affordable conversions? I can't think of a better way to put it, but properties that didn't have to follow the same regulations as before can now become affordable units under this new act and get it immediately.
Well, yes, in the next year, if they meet all the criteria and show that their residents are meeting the criteria and their units are occupied and so forth. I don't think you're going to see sort of tomorrow a lot of people just rushing to do this. It takes a fair bit of process for them to get set up and get their tenant base and so forth and so on. But yes, that's what can happen.
So who actually would be approving those? Does it, because I know there's a listing in here for the corporation, does that go through us or does this go to the state? Who decides?
So they must get certain, would you call them licenses?
Florida
Jocelyn?
Housing
Yeah.
Finance Corporation from the state.
Do you call that a license or
It's
a
certification.
You do have to have a certification from the state that you are meeting their requirements to be affordable, and then you apply with the property appraiser's office if it's a property tax exemption you're trying to get.
Okay.
I know that later in the conversation, you're going to hear about other entitlements, I don't know if that's the word, that they may be eligible for that are not regarding property taxes. But for the property tax exemption, when you come to us and say, right, I'd like to make an application for a affordable housing project, we're going to be asking you for a number of bits of data. Now, if you're for-profit, we won't be asking you anymore to see the 15-year look back or see the LURA, but we will be looking for these certifications from the Florida Housing,
So
along with a lot of other information about your tenant mix and a number of units that are occupied and number of units that potentially can be occupied. There's a lot around that too. If a unit is being preserved for somebody who is going to meet the affordability criteria, then we are told to give an exemption on that unit. But if a unit is designated for an income level that is outside of the criteria, then that unit is taxed.
You mean if it's vacant at the time, but it's going to be?
So if it's
leased.
vacant, so everything is based on January 1st with us, whether it's how we value your property or whether you get an exemption or anything. So if on January 1st the unit was vacant, however, the unit was designated for an affordable unit, then we are told to give an exemption to that unit.
So all of this that's happening, you will have to have all of this ready to go by January 1st of next year. That's when,
Well, that's, if you are a new project, you have to have everything in place for January 1st. And if you can't, because you're still getting your certifications or you're still building even, you would go to 2025. In our case, we're in right now. So so projects that are thinking about it today can't get the exemption today because the tax roll is all based on what is the status of the property on January 1st.
okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor and then Commissioner Marino.
Thank you, Ms. Jacks. It was interesting. This is a lot of work for all of us and county staff. It appears that there's about $500 million in property tax exemptions in the present status today. We know that local governments are run on money that comes in from property taxes. Do we have any indication that under the new law that we will have less or more in money coming in from property taxes to fund our local governments? Do we know?
It's very hard to predict. I think that because we're digesting this law, as I'm sure the community is as well, the folks who are in this business are probably also digesting it and trying to see what the pros and cons are to moving forward with building with affordability, if you will. I'm sure we will continue to have a lot of not-for-profits in this sphere, and I think that's wonderful. I mean, Palm Beach County is a very charitable place, and that's great. Whether we'll have a big increase in the number of for-profits, I think waits to be seen, based on a lot of factors, which are outside of really my knowledge, as it were, at this point. We have not had a lot of interest from the public at this point in this. We haven't received sometimes when a new bill is passed, our phones start ringing with questions from people who are looking to apply for something. We haven't had that yet.
So it could go either way. It could either go, depending on the public response to this, and dependent on developers, we could either get more money in to fund local governments, or we could get less. But I think the intent of the bill is not with regard to what local governments are going to get, but that there will be a statewide policy on affordable housing regardless of local zoning ordinances.
I don't really have a lot I can say. I don't know what's going to happen, I guess
Okay,
is the
so we'll
simple
see.
answer. Yes.
Looking at the bill, it seems that it involves, and I'm reading from this, Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which is a public-private entity that administers the two largest statewide affordable housing programs. The State Apartment Incentive Loan Program, which is SAIL, and the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, SHIP. These are the entities in the state that are going to be operating and running this program under the Live Local bill. I also read that they're going to be, and when we ask, who's going to help us with this? How do we navigate this? This is really going to be that they will, the bill, the law, authorizes the FHFC through contract with the Florida Housing Coalition to provide technical assistance to local governments to facilitate the use and the enforcement or the application of this bill. And I wonder, is it your office that we will be working with to navigate these waters on how to how our county can still receive property tax revenue and provide affordable housing for those in need?
Well, it won't be my office. I know that your departments here are well-versed or becoming well-versed in these credits and these organizations at the state level that are going to help with that. And I know that Dorrit is going to be talking about that next. Because really, again, it's a three-part bill. It's property taxes, it's credits, and it's zoning, land issues. I mean, just to be very simplistic about it. We will, of course, manage the property tax portion of this, exemptions, just that.
Okay. And the last is that I would ask that your office stay in close contact with us in our department so that we can express an opinion. Because as to the property taxes that come to really generate income for the maintenance of local governments. Because let's not forget that we run on these property taxes. And that if this is, and I don't think that it is the intent of the bill or the law, don't think so after I've read about it. I think the intent is more to say, by God, we're going to have a general statewide policy. We're going to make affordable housing regardless of local ordinances. My concern is the property taxes that are going to be coming in, also for the affordable housing. But in terms of your office, if you could stay in close touch with the county to make sure that we don't miss out on any funds that go from the state into those different public-private partnerships that I just talked about, SAIL and SHIP, so that we get the monies that we are due. And that's what I asked you all. It's not easy, but it is important for us so that we can fund our needs here in the county. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, it'll be Commissioner Bernard and then Commissioner Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dorothy, thanks for the presentation. Regarding the state removing I guess, the 15 years that they have to wait to get the exemption, and also removing the LoRa, how do you think that will impact your ability to, I guess, get the information from the developers now that they don't have to do the LoRa?
Well, the good thing about our process and our law, the law that we'll follow under 1961978, is that it's very specific about what is considered a complete application. Obviously, we work with these applicants every year, and if we don't get the data that we need substantially or completely, we have the option to deny them the exemption. And actually, usually that prompts the completion of the application. But I only say that because if, for instance, a project wasn't able to provide us with the certification from the state, we would simply say, you know, we're unable to process the application because we don't have your certificate from the state, and maybe it's a matter of time and they'll apply again the next year. But there'll be no issues on our part with if somebody isn't qualified, they won't get the benefit. Same thing with the information on the rent rolls and on the qualification of the clients, of the tenants. That's a very straightforward process. Affidavits, information about their income, you know, the levels that they're charging per unit, how much it is. And of course, the less they provide to us, the less exemption they'll get, because they can get a percentage. So usually we've had really good compliance with the information coming to us, and if we don't, we're not able to grant the exemption.
Follow up, Ms. Mayor. Dorothy, in regards to when you are you receiving like the certifications that they've submitted to Florida Housing Finance Corporation? Is that what you're using to provide that?
Well, now, you know, in the past, it's been the LoRa.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're waiting to, I believe this new certification, and maybe Jonathan knows, is new. And so we're going to wait to see what it says. But if the law says that that's what they'll provide us to show that they have met the state's requirements to be an affordability provider, then we'll wait to receive that certification.
Okay. And do you receive, like, I think they're typically audited. Do you receive that information also from the affordable housing developers?
I don't believe the audit is required as part of the application.
Okay.
Possibly it is at the state level, but I don't believe it. Certainly at the moment it isn't, and I don't believe in the new rules it will be.
Thank you. And just my final comment is just that regarding the option, and you know, as we're navigating this local option, I'm hoping that we can work with you to provide us, you know, how that would impact our tax dollars, so in that way we can make informed decisions. So thanks for being here, and we look forward to working with you so now we can make the correct decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dorothy, for coming down here and presenting us. I guess I just had a couple questions. So is there any part of this program that could help current single-family owners that are struggling? Costs have increased exponentially. The AMI is higher. They might fall within that affordable or rate of what they're making. Is there any part of this that can help them?
From a property tax standpoint, unless they are owned by or under the CLT guidelines or owned by an affordable housing organization, adoptive family, et cetera, no, they are of course eligible for all the exemptions that are available, but I don't know if that's something contemplated under any of the other sections, the tax credit section, but our property tax exemptions are to organizations or businesses, if you will, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit, and they are, unless you are the person who's able to purchase a CLT home. And then, of course, you are individually owning those 277 properties we have, and you are getting a nice savings on your property taxes because your land is exempt.
Is there discretion within the county if somebody is on the verge of having to foreclose, can't make their payments, that can we, the body, set up our own CLT to try to help some of these hardships?
We do our foreclosure prevention. Jonathan, you want to speak to that?
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner. Yes, the county does offer a foreclosure prevention program for those residents who are income eligible, who are at the point of either received a lis pendens or in foreclosure. And then we also offer a mortgage assistance program for those who are just delinquent on their mortgage. Those programs will pay principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, whether they are in an escrow or whether they are separate.
Okay,
Any
thank you.
HOAs and condo association fees.
I think the thing about community land trust properties is it's usually they sort of begin that process. You know, you can't transition your home into a community land trust once it's your home, but certainly, you know, it's a great program, and a lot, I know they take applications based on income and so forth to allow people to get to the point of home ownership. It's, so, you know, I know that I don't think anything in Live Local has changed the ability for the CLTs to continue to do the good work they're doing.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to know, have you guys estimated, calculated, and I'm kind of being redundant just for clarification, the potential deficits in our tax revenue?
No, we haven't done any calculations. We gave a lot of thought to how could we, but because this is all about potential growth as opposed to properties on the land, you know, quite often you'll ask us, or Ms. Baker will ask us, you know, they're thinking about an exemption for whatever it is, you know, seniors who are this or that, and we can usually come up with a method to try to calculate an approximate amount. But I think the whole purpose of this program is to incentivize developers and others to contemplate affordability and to provide them you know, some nice benefits to be able to do that as part of their business portfolio. It's really, it is difficult though to know what that looks like into the future, whether they'll make those decisions and say, yep, this is a good business decision for me to move into the affordability sphere. I mean, I think we all hope that they will, but I think it waits to be seen how it will actually happen. And certainly many of you have asked about following up. We will definitely provide you each year with the updated reports of how much has been added. I know we'll be in close contact with your staff about it as we move forward. We're always happy to do that.
Thank you. I guess just one last thing. Do you think that there's definitely going to be some sort of deficit? Should we really start considering scaling because we're going to start budget talks here coming up, and maybe it won't affect us this year, but preparing for the future?
Certainly not this year, because of course all of this will affect 2024 moving forward. If we start to see a very big influx of again, the phone starts ringing about, you know, will we qualify and how will this work? We will definitely be in touch with you to let you know that we're starting to think that there's going to be a lot of interest in it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Administrator Baker? Oh, okay. I had a question. So if somebody has they're renting out a single-family home, and they say, based on the income of what they're generating from that single-family home and the people they're renting to now will come into, potentially fall underneath this program, would they then be eligible to access that exemption?
Not individuals. Say you own a home and you rent it to somebody, you wouldn't qualify. If the home is owned by a not-for-profit, certainly it will be. Or an organization that has qualified for this certificate that we're learning about from the state.
So if you owned it in an LLC then, so if you put it into an LLC and then got that LLC certified from the state, then you could take advantage of that.
You probably could. Right? Would you, I
And then-
mean, as long as you meet the criteria of, that we now will have about this certification, then you probably could,
So
yeah,
lem-
as a for-profit.
Yeah, but I think there is a limit. It has to be more than 70 affordable units per household, up to
Oh,
120% AMI.
But
So the
that's on the
single one-
higher end. I'm not sure if you were renting to somebody who was, you see, this is
99
exactly
lease.
why we,
Well,
Yeah.
let me do another what if with you and add on. So what
Yes.
if you had an accessory dwelling unit attached to that? And so you rented out let's say, the big house or the main house to somebody, called it affordable, made it affordable with qualifying people. But then you took the ADU and put it into short-term rental. What would that look like?
It's a missing middle.
I would,
don't see this
I
here.
think I would have to,
Pull your hair out?
yeah,
Doesn't
no, I think we
Doesn't
would have
apply.
to, yeah, dig in a little more deeply on a question like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of what is written today really contemplates a big organization running a affordability project,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and running it in a very business-like manner. I'm not sure that it really contemplates that, although, you know,
All right.
stranger things, right?
And the last thing I leave you with, and since you started out this morning talking about the work you all do today, so if, on the compliance side of folks, so, and you say they sign an affidavit, is there any auditing of that to compare an affidavit to a tax return to see if in fact what's being promulgated is actually true?
No, not at this moment, no. Most of the people who are signing the affidavits are, I mean, it's a notarized form. It asks them, are you above or below this set income threshold? You know, they're signing it, sometimes they have to give us their actual income, but no, there is nothing beyond that. Do remember that we're working with literally hundreds per property sometimes. So, and you can.
Understand, but I think there was a story not too long ago in the Palm Beach Post talking about somebody, property management company taking advantage of this and not actually having the folks that were entitled to have.
And we did remove that, we would remove the exemption, and under the new law, we are allowed to also go back up to 10 years for any property, through a tax lien process, for any property that fraudulently received a benefit they weren't entitled to, just as you are with homestead. So we do have that, which has been added in, which gives us additional teeth to a process of if somebody was receiving something they shouldn't have been.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, you recognize.
It's very interesting because as I read the analysis of the bill, it seems like it's removing our authority on, and I'm talking about county and your office as well, our authority on reviewing these applications for affordable housing and taking it up to again, this finance, Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which is going to be the entity that really administers this new regulations on affordable housing, and the state and sale and ship. So it's, again, what I want to know, and maybe later on we can discuss it, but who do we go to in the state? Do we have these departments, and we have the Department of Revenue that's going to review this, but later on I'd like for you to tell us
Okay.
what entity in the state, what person can we have the telephone number of that is going to administer this? Because it appears that it takes away our authority to administer this and puts it up to the state level, and then these entities, these public-private corporations will will administer this. So later on in our discussion, as this is a workshop, I'd like to know, because it also affects, to me, there's two big issues here. One is to have affordable housing, but also to takes away our ability to have our own local ordinances when it comes to zoning, which is huge. And the second, I want to know about how much money are we going to gain or lose from property taxes, which funds our services here in the county. So
I will just say that I don't, at least for the property tax section, understanding there are 3 distinct sections to this bill, but under the property tax section, we will continue our diligence over the proper application process, the proper documentation provided by the applicant, whether it's a single applicant or an applicant for an 80-unit building. We're going to continue to do that. And we do have a lot of methods at our disposal, both to deny an application if it's not complete, or to, and as I mentioned, to return the money to a tax roll for a property that received a benefit that they shouldn't have. And so we'll be actively making sure all that happens, as we do now. The nice thing about my rules and laws around exemption is they're very black and white. They're very, if you give us this, if you give us that, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And so we're going to continue our processes with the new changes and learning as we go along about these different levels. I mean, I will point out one thing. You say, will it add money or take money away from the tax roll? Well, any exemption takes money away from the tax roll. Having said that, these properties potentially, if they are not completely affordable, will add money. Do you see? So if you have a project, which only 50% of it or 70% of it is affordable, then 30% is going to go to market and be added to the tax roll. So, just as a point, you say, is there money coming off or is there money going on? Well, there might be a little money going on that might not otherwise have gone on. Possibly they might not have developed that building at all. Maybe they would have just left that property vacant. But, Okay. However, an exemption by its very nature takes money away.
I appreciate your diligence in this, because it's going to me, that's one of the consequences, not unintended, by the way, I don't think, but certainly a consequence of this, of taking local preemption and giving it to the state. I want to make sure that we still get the funds, the revenues coming in from our properties that we should, because we have services. I don't see the state coming in and taking care of our services yet. But right now, I think that it's good that we have this diligence, and I appreciate you being here too, with your staff. Thank you.
And I will just, one just final comment is, I think the thing that we all can appreciate is that our community is better for having places for people to live who work here. Even our own employees, it's a struggle, I know, for you and for us to hire and retain great people if they can't find a pleasant place to live. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to my friends and colleagues from Miami-Dade, this problem is pretty severe in Miami-Dade. And let's hope that these sorts of things, if we can put guardrails around them so that they are, managed appropriately and the right people get the right exemptions and so forth, that we can build some affordability for our even just our staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator Baker, you're recognized.
I'd like to thank Ms. Jacks along with Mr. Jackson for their help. We have been pestering them, but Dorothy has always worked with staff throughout the years, and we will continue to work together. We go to her to make sure that we're pointing in the right direction. She, of course, cannot give us absolutes, especially when we start working for budgets until July 1. But we definitely take input from her, and she's always been there for us. So thank you very much. I thought it would be more appropriate if you hear directly from her on this issue as opposed to us talking to her and then bringing it back to you. So thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Okay, so Thank you, Dorothy. It has always been a pleasure working with her. And just to summarize this tax exemption, the whole goal actually is to encourage more affordable housing, and hopefully we will meet that goal. So thanks again. So moving right along is we are now discussing funding and tax credits, and I will hand it over to Jonathan Brown.
Good morning again, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, Administrator Baker. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Live Local Act has provided with regards to some funding sources and tax credits. So the $252 million in the State Housing Initiatives Partnership Program, that is our SHIP program. That is a program that we have worked with Florida Housing Finance Corporation with for many, many years. They are the agency that we report to when it comes to the use of their SHIP dollars. One of the things I want to share for you all that may or may not know, so SHIP is the funding source, but there are a number of different strategies or programs that we fund using SHIP, whether it's purchase assistance for home buyers, owner-occupied housing rehab, emergency repair, we typically foreclosure prevention, developer assistance. We typically use the SHIP program to provide preservation for existing housing, and then also for developers who are looking to create new housing. The SHIP dollars are, this is one of the only local, of all the programs we're going to talk about, this is the only one that's administered locally. So SHIP program dollars are provided to the county as an entitlement jurisdiction, and it's also provided to 7 municipalities that are entitlement municipalities throughout the county. This upcoming year, the county is going to receive $12.4 million, whereas in the year that we're operating in, it's $10.3. Our dollars typically are used to assist those that are either in unincorporated Palm Beach County or in the non-entitlement cities. Now, the 7 entitlement cities throughout the county that receive their own allocation of funding, you have Boca, you have Boynton, you have Gardens, you have Jupiter, you have Delray, you have Wellington, you have West Palm. They receive their own allocation of SHIP dollars. So typically, we're not assisting residents in those municipalities. We're typically only assisting residents in the non-entitlements and unincorporated Palm Beach County. If there's a scenario where we need to assist someone in an entitlement city, there's a process that has to be followed in order for us to do that. So again, we will receive $12.4 million beginning July 1st, and those 7 cities, those entitlement cities, will split $4.9 million. Again, just a note, we only provide dollars in the unincorporated and the non-entitlement communities from that perspective, and this is a county-administered program.
Coming back with the allocation plan.
And so with regards to our SHIP dollars, we will be bringing to you July 11th, I believe is the commission date, our local housing assistance plan, which is the recommendation of how we want to use the SHIP dollars for the upcoming year. We've met with our Commission on Affordable Housing. They have supported the recommendations, and so you'll be hearing more a detailed strategy with regards to the use of those SHIP dollars. The $259 million in the State Department Incentive Loan Program, again, another program that's administered through Florida Housing Finance Corporation, but it is not locally administered. We don't have any say-so in that particular program. That is for multifamily affordable developers who are going to provide affordable housing for certain set-asides, and the set-asides are there with regards to units for individuals that will be leasing. The state provides a low-interest loan on a competitive basis for those applicants, and typically you'll see sale as a match, or it's paired with the 4% tax credit. What the state has provided in Live Local is that an additional $150 million over and above whatever the set-aside is for sale will be allocated over the next 10 years. There's also the sales tax refund program, again, administered by the state, where up to $5,000 for building materials used for affordable housing units, the developers can receive that sales tax refund. $100 million for the implementation of their competitive loan program. Now, this program is not new. It's current program here now. Typically, what you'll see is the 9% tax credit projects that have been awarded. If they have run into increased costs due to inflation, the state already provides an access or an avenue for them to get additional dollars to fill in the gap and to ensure their project can move forward. Then we have the Hometown Heroes program. Hometown Heroes program, again, is not a new program, but they have expanded on some of the opportunities there. Now it is open to all industries, all employment types, as opposed to a selective few over the existing establishment of the program. You must be an eligible first-time home buyer. Their program is a 0% loan that is repaid when you sell the home or you transfer title. And it is for individuals that are Florida residents employed at least 35 hours by a Florida-based employer. So that's important to recognize. And then one of the other nuances that you'll see with their program is that their max funding, their funding is going to go from $10,000 to $35,000. When we looked at this program, it also just kind of reminds us in terms of how we administer our programs. Typically, we will not provide more than a lender unless we're going to take a dominant lien position. In this particular case, Florida Housing has stated that we're given, they're going to provide up to $35,000, and it doesn't matter if the county provides 60 or 70, you can't take a better lien position than us. And so our initial thought is we will more than likely, if an applicant wants to use this program, we will be equal to or less than whatever they provide in the Hometown Heroes program, just to ensure that we are not using our local dollars and being put in a lesser lien position if we provide more. And then for the Hometown Heroes program, whereas the SHIP program, our Purchase Assistance Program, goes up to 140% AMI, theirs will go up to 150% AMI. There is also a community contribution tax credit program being offered by the state. This program basically encourages private sector participation by offering a corporate income tax or insurance premium and other sales tax refunds. Again, an existing program, not a new program. What they're looking to do is increase the tax credit availability from $14.5 million to $25 million for projects that will provide home ownership opportunities for the low and very low income. And then there is the Job Growth Grant Fund. Again, not a new program, but it's been amended to include public infrastructure projects that will support affordable housing. Okay. And at this point, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner Marino, and
Thank
then
you.
Commissioner Bernard.
So for SHIP, that goes through the county.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so for the ones that you said are administered by the state, how does the county help in that administration?
We do not necessarily help in the administration of those projects, but if a developer is coming to the county for some sort of match dollars, then we'll typically provide some match. So typically when we talk about sale, the developer will go get sale. They'll usually use it to match a 4% tax credit, but they'll also come to us for the contribution, because typically when you're going through some sort of competitive process, a local contribution is what's needed to help you score better.
And if I may add, so because the state has added more funding to the sale program, we are potentially could see more developers taking advantage of it. So we'll have more units, and more than likely we'll be able to provide some more gap financing. So it encourages more affordable units.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bernard?
Thanks, Jonathan. On the Hometown Heroes program, can you go back and explain the lien position that you talked about?
Yes, sir. So in conversations with Florida Housing Coalition and Florida Housing Finance Corporation, we were trying to understand how the lien position is going to work. Typically right now, when we're doing a purchase deal, an individual purchase deal, the first mortgage lender will put in the most dollars, and then the county or municipality would come in with a lien amount or a assistance amount less than the first mortgage lien. And so we're typically in second lien position. In the Hometown Heroes program, we want to see how we can leverage our dollars with their dollars, but what we've been advised from the state was, it doesn't matter how much we're putting in from the county. If the county is putting in $75,000 and Hometown Heroes is putting in $10,000, Hometown Heroes goes in second lien position in all instances.
So what's the reasoning behind, like, us not wanting to be in a third position?
From the standpoint of foreclosures, we take a look at that and try to, look at the risk for lien positions. And again, these programs, we typically operate like a lender. And in these programs, the lenders who have either the highest or the second highest, the amount of funding dictates typically lien position.
So if we're going to be in a third position, like the difference between second or third, it's either the state or us. Like, why do we have to take a set rule that we're not going to, that we have to be in second position? Is there any flexibility
Yes,
for
sir.
us to at least
Yes, sir.
weigh each circumstance based on, the circumstance?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, it's absolutely the board's decision. The practice has always been, and the direction has always been in all of our other programs, is that we don't take a lesser lien position if we're providing more money. And so what I'm sharing with you was based on what we've always been directed to do in the practice. The assumption is how we were going to work with this, but it's absolutely up to the board.
I just would like for us to at least, if the person can get the money from the state and the state can be in second position, but I don't know if I want us to deny that ability, at least on a case-by-case basis to see.
Mm-hmm. It's just been our financial position, best recommendation to this board is that we look at, as Jonathan said, normally the mortgage company has the first position, period. And then we will come in normally second, or a municipality may come in second because they're investing more money than we are. So if that property goes into foreclosure or whatever, it's sold, then the mortgage company takes their portion, and then whoever is second, if there's anything left over, they take their portion, and then the third person takes theirs. This is our normal procedure, but if this board wants to do Hometown Heroes differently, you can give us that direction. I would recommend that we continue with the process that we have so that we don't end up investing more dollars, and then the state ends up really getting the rest of whatever is left over, and we don't get our investment back or anywhere near the investment we put in. That's all.
But isn't the money coming from the state? So it's not your money.
Well, it's coming from the state, but it's dollars we could have invested in other projects or to someone else. And so financially, that's normally how things work. We want to make sure we're getting the best return on the investment of the dollars that we're putting in on the public's behalf. But if that's not what this board wants to do for this particular program, we can make adjustments.
Just want to make sure the dollars that we typically would provide for that purchase assistance, where's it coming from?
It comes either, if we're using SHIP, then we're using state funds, we're using SHIP. If it's HUD, we're using home program, or NSP. It just depends on the funding source. This particular one is just SHIP, Florida Housing. But again, we could pair any of our state or federal funds to be the local match.
So it's their dollars. We're getting other dollars from the state, and you're saying that we can't be in that we cannot be in a third position. That doesn't make sense to me.
We can do whatever this board wants. It's normally not our policy. If we're investing or leveraging those dollars, again, we could leverage those dollars for other projects as well. But we choose to work with our developers especially if they're going after the 4% tax credit, et cetera. So.
But this is not 4% tax credit. This is just a regular homeowner who's trying to purchase a property, and they have the opportunity to get the Hometown Hero program, and then you're just basically saying that because they're getting this Hometown Hero loan, they have to get less dollars from the county just because of that. So you basically want to punish them.
No.
For you are, because
Oh.
you're saying that if they could have received, let's say $60,000, you're saying now if they're only getting $10,000 from the state, they can only receive $10,000 from the state.
What we're saying is that.
That's what you're saying.
It's the position that we're talking about, the financial position. And so again, whatever this board wants to do, that is fine. We're just saying what our normal financial investment and leveraging of dollars happens to be. I hear you loud and clear on this. We definitely want as many dollars coming into this county for workforce housing and affordable housing, but that's not our normal procedure. I'm open to any direction the board wants to give us. It's a matter of just positions, that's it.
I'd love to hear from the board before I.
All right, let's hear from the board. Yeah. Well, we got a whole bunch of people lit up, so we'll start moving through them, and hopefully they will come. Not in that way. I didn't mean it.
You can say it. We're here to listen.
All right. Commissioner Baxter and then Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I definitely do not want to see people punished for using the Hometown Heroes program, and whether directly or indirectly, it sounds like that's what this does. So I would fully support for this program, making it us able or capable of being that third position. If this makes it easier for our residents, and it makes it easier for them to get some dollars to help them purchase their first home, that's one of those milestones in life that you can't ever get back, and if we can make that a little bit easier for people, I think that's absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodward, and then we'll have Vice Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Just to come back, so Florida Hometown Heroes is funded through SHIP sale. Sorry.
It's a state-funded program, and I believe it's some form of SHIP, not necessarily, but it's a state-funded program, similar source as our SHIP dollars.
Okay, so where does SHIP get its money from?
From Florida Housing, and Florida Housing Finance Corporation would be the same ones who would administer the Hometown Heroes as well as the sale.
So that money is coming from us and every other resident in the state of Florida.
Right.
Correct.
Under the Sadowski Act, you have the dock stamps, and that goes into a pool, like a bucket at the state, and it is allocated to different areas. So SHIP comes out of part of that Sadowski dock stamps, okay? And the Hometown Hero is also another bucket that the state has established for first-time home buyer purchase assistance.
Okay, so I just wanted to make clear for myself, most of all, that when we say they, it's us, like it's our tax dollars.
So the SHIP, yes.
In some form that gets put into this. So, it's
Exactly.
not their money, it's actually still our money. And I would just say, I understand your position on putting a limit on what's put on here if we're going to be third, doing that. But I also would encourage everyone to consider if we're, not going overboard by too much, because we could actually help more households with an equal dollar amount to whatever the state is recommending, or whatever the state's going to do. If we match them and not go over, we could actually help more people with down payment assistance and closing costs and whatever the Hometown Heroes program would offer if we don't, if we limit it in a way, but we could actually help more people, more households make a purchase. So this is just a different way to think about it.
Right. So in terms of the existing policy, okay, that we administer, is that, what it would require is that the policy would be that if you are a recipient of the Hometown Heroes Award program and the county is providing purchase assistance, it would be capped at the amount from the Home Heroes Award, because we will be in third position in any case, okay? But it's a matter of limiting our exposure. So that is based on current policy. Okay? Good. Right? Yeah.
All right. Okay, moving on, we will go to Vice Mayor and then Commissioner Marino.
Thank you, and I don't know if we're going to need more staff to get into some of the meat of this, but it appears that the question that I had before about how much money are we going to lose as a county was answered in their fiscal impact analysis of this bill, of this law, and it states that property tax exemptions for newly constructed or substantially renovated multifamily rental units will reduce local government revenues by $183 million by fiscal year 2027, 2028, with no impact in fiscal year 2023 and 2024. So we are going to get a hit in local government or county revenues from this law. However, the good news is that there will be a reduction in bureaucracy by developers of multifamily housing, and there'll be an increase in the amount of property available for residential development relating to housing projects which qualify for the density, height, and zoning preemptions. So what we have to be careful of is that, or we have to be prepared for, is to be able to develop an analysis of those lands in those properties in our county that will qualify for this, because I could anticipate developers coming, cutting through any local bureaucracy that I call administration, not bureaucracy, and just going forward to the state and saying, this parcel of land qualifies for a multifamily development, and then moving forward on it. So I think that we are going to get a hit, not this year, but next year and following on our revenues, because that's where we get our money from, is property taxes. But secondly, I think that we need to be prepared as a county to identify those properties that qualify for multifamily housing, and then let's move forward and use whatever state funds we can to develop housing, affordable housing in areas that qualify for that type. So I think that if we are prepared, then we will do very well in this, but we have to be very well. Because I agree with my local commissioners who say, if we can get money from the state for this, that's what we pay our taxes for. But we have to be prepared so that our properties are developed in the right way for affordable housing, and not in a flim-flam way just to help for-profit developers. So.
And so we'll be going into the third component of the bill, which is land development and zoning that you just touched on.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Marino and then Commissioner Baxter.
Thank you. So on topic, we're talking about the Hometown Heroes program at the moment and where we would be on the collection list. But one, Hometown Heroes is funded by the Sadowski funds. Sadowski Housing, and I wish everybody would say Sadowski Housing Trust Fund, is basically a fee collected when someone purchases a home. So it's not ad valorem tax dollars that are paying this, it's actually, you could say, a user fee. So does that clarify for you a little bit about where the money comes from? Because it's not our ad valorem taxes. It is someone who's choosing to purchase a home and then they pay this fee. So yes, it's a fee, but it's not our ad valorem tax dollars.
It's doc stamps.
It's doc stamps when you close on your
When you
home.
close on a house.
Yeah. On anybody who buys a home in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a big pot. And if you sold a home someplace else and bought a home here, you're going to pay it here. But it all goes to the state and then comes back. So, not federal. For the housing, the Florida Hometown Heroes program, is there a requirement that we take third position?
Yes.
So, Do we have a choice?
No.
Sorry, Mac. I think that might clarify your question.
Easy, right?
Or Verdine, that might clarify your question.
It's easy.
It's whether you cap the amount.
Our only issue was that if we're investing double the amount and the state is saying, we don't care, you're still taking third position, our normal procedure is not to do that. And so, you know, if this board tells us we don't care, hometown heroes, you're taking third, we'll take that third with a smile.
But to follow up on that, this is not ad valorem tax dollars that are covering this. This is money that we've received as a grant. So whether we're in first, second, or third position, it's not really our dollars that we are spending or losing. It's money that we've received from the state, regardless of the fact that it was collected as a, from, out of the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund. So it's not money that affects our budget.
You mean ad valorem budget, it's not ad valorem?
No, because it's not ad valorem dollars that's going to this. This is money that's come to us as a grant, correct?
It's very similar to, let's say, sales tax. People pay sales tax regardless of where they are. Those sales tax that we collect in Palm Beach County goes up to the Department of Revenue, and then the governor and legislature decide what the budget is, and then they allocate those dollars back. Sadowski funds are very similar. There used to be a time it truly was a trust fund. So those dollars went into, the dock stamps went up to Tallahassee, they went into that fund, they had a formula, they allocated 100% of those dock stamps, that revenue back down to the local government. We are a donor county.
For everything.
No matter what way you look at it. And so those dollars still go up. They sweep a portion of it for general fund, and then they reallocate it. This is the first year in a long time they've increased that amount. So they are increasing that amount. They are sending it back, and it is a result, it's coming through the SHIP program. And so we do get a portion. They've allocated another pot of money for Hometown Heroes. So it's all coming out of that pot. And so, again, we're not objecting to it. We just simply are following our normal procedures that I think you would want me to follow in these financial situations. However, if the board wants something different, then we'll do it. We don't have a problem with that.
And just for clarification on the Hometown Heroes, last year they took the money from the sale program, and this year they are using the money from the general revenue.
Yeah, and Todd was here keeping tabs on legislation. Okay. Okay.
Okay, I think this is a greater conversation, a longer conversation.
All right. No, Commissioner Baxter and then Vice Mayor.
So allowing the dollars that come to us from the state and taking third position, does that not open up more resources for residents who want to be first-time home buyers?
Sherry.
Does that make it easier for them?
I'm not sure if it's going to make it easier for them, again, because first-time home, the Hometown Heroes program is not new. It's an existing program. We've not had anyone to request our dollars in match with the Hometown Heroes, but now that they're expanding to industries, there's a chance that they may come. And so we wanted to have this conversation in terms of what our existing processes are in relation to what we really want to do now that we may receive applicants needing both monies from the state and monies from us, Hometown Heroes, and from the county.
Property values, as everyone knows, over the past few years has gone through the roof. And usually down payment programs are based on a percentage. So is this taking into consideration those percentages, or is this just total dollar amounts?
Typically with our program, we're a lender, so we operate it like a lender. So we look at the front end ratios where the individual's not spending more than, let's say, 30 to 35% of their income on principal, interest, taxes, insurance, condo or HOA fees. And then we look at a back end ratio, which includes all their other debt, and we try to stay between 42 and 45%. So we look at their income toward housing, their income toward everything, and we try to stay within a lending ratio because, again, that's what has helped the county mitigate a lot of foreclosures on our programs.
And I can definitely appreciate and respect that. Do we know how many people, because we're working on worst-case scenario here, that every single loan we give in a third position is going to default? And I don't really like setting policies, assuming the worst in everything. But I do like to be cautious. I do like to not, take it too far the other direction. But I would still be in favor of a third, just being able to allow for that third position to, I have an entire Westerns community that could really use this program. It just seems to make sense and allow more people access. So I don't know, is there something I'm missing here other than the potential for default of why this would be so bad?
You're missing nothing, you're good.
No, that's again what we look at, because again, when you foreclose, as Ms. Baker was going through, first mortgage lender will get their monies back. Something left, the second mortgage lender will get their monies back. If we're second, we get something back, we bring that back and say, commissioners, we have additional dollars that we can now make available to our community. If we're in third and nothing comes back, then there's no additional dollars or that we could recirculate back into the community. That's the only difference.
And who are we taking third to?
In this case, it would be Florida Housing Finance Corporation's Hometown Heroes program.
So the state, essentially?
Yes.
And then they would be the ones allocating the dollars regardless? Essentially, we're getting them from them.
From the legislature through them to us, yes, ma'am.
So it seems like we're almost going in circles, like their dollars are coming to us. They're allowing us to give to residents.
Our dollars.
Yes, they are our dollars. I agree. With that, I just think we should, help the people. And if this is that one policy thing that prevents us from helping more people, I would just like to see some work within that.
Oh, that's fine.
We work at the pleasure of the board, so whatever the direction is, we will happily carry it out.
All right, Vice Mayor, and then we go to Commissioner Marino, and then to Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you very much. I think that and I think Ms. Howard was about to say it, that the Florida Hometown Heroes program is going to be funded by general revenue and not by any trust fund. So it's important for us when we speak to our constituents that they know that the money is going to be coming from state taxes, which we all pay, to fund that Florida Hometown Heroes Act. It's just different buckets. People pay the city bucket, county bucket, state bucket. This is going to come $100 million from the state, and of course, they're going to administer it, and they're going to, for the Florida Housing Corporation, Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So it's just a new policy being put into place, but it's important, as was stated, that we make sure that the end game is always housing for our people in the state of Florida, and especially for our county. Even though we're going to get a hit on lost revenue, still we may gain by at least finding housing for our constituents, and then, of course, more people will come, and it'll be good for the entire county. So I think that's important to understand. Either way, taxpayers pay, but it's good for us in the long run. Thank you.
3 minutes.
All right, let's see, we have Commissioner Marino, then Commissioner Woodward.
I guess following up what Commissioner Baxter said was, do we have a history of people defaulting, and how much has that been? And that actually would help guide us. Because if 1% of all the loans that went out have defaulted, whether we're second or third is irrelevant. If it's 50% of the people defaulting, then it becomes more of a relevant discussion. So if you've got a history of people that have been defaulting, or a number, or a dollar amount, or quantity, something to help guide us in our decision, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, Commissioner, it's a very low percentage. We don't typically have this come up. There are rare situations where they do, but it's very, very low.
So in essence, this is really a moot point.
Yes, ma'am. It's just about what lien position do you want to be in based on the amount of funds the county may provide.
That's all.
But if there hasn't been a history of people defaulting, whether we're second or third doesn't really matter.
I think what we wanted to ensure, because we do follow, we've got rules and stringent rules in place that we utilize when we're doing the lending. And so that has worked very well for us. And in this particular case, we can do whatever the board wants us to do. We just didn't want that one case to come up and then it blows up on us and people are saying, well, why were you in third position when you put in 3 times or twice the amount that the state did? That's all. And so if it is this board's direction for us to, for this particular program to take the third position, that's what we will do.
So the $100 million is being spread out around the entire state, not just Palm Beach County.
That's correct.
Yes, residents throughout the county would have to apply to the state. They'd have to, it won't work through the county at all. They'll have to apply to the state. If they're going to receive dollars, they'll have to provide that to us as a commitment, just like they would a first mortgage commitment, and work through that process.
Well, with 67 other counties,
Yes, ma'am.
you know, the chances of how much money we're getting for this is not a whole lot either. All right, so with that, I'll let everybody else ponder on that one.
Commissioner Woodward?
Thank you. Sorry, it took me a moment to find what I was looking for, page 87 of this very large document. Just so, I'm just trying to kind of nail this down for myself. The Hometown Heroes program, this part is a loan. It's a 0% interest loan that's provided. It's not a grant or a gift for people when they're buying their home. So this is money that's loaned to them for closing costs or down payment assistance. And it says here, paid by the minimum of $10,000, up to 5% of the first mortgage not exceeding $35,000. So the $35,000, our share of that $35,000 from this program would be what?
Well, again, so this would be the state's program, so they can provide up to $35,000 in theirs, but understand, for the county side, we can provide up to $100,000. And so our program goes a lot higher than the state's program does.
So currently, our program would allow what?
Up to $100,000.
Up to 100, on top of the 35,000 that's
Yes,
given
ma'am.
here. So we don't actually have a percentage of the down payment because $100,000 is a very large down payment for not an affordable house, I'm assuming?
Right. It's for an affordable house, but again, we take a look at the front-end ratios, their ratios in terms of what they're spending for their total housing payment, and then their back-end ratios. So we take a look, a lender's look, at how much assistance we need to provide the gap financing in order to make the home affordable.
Okay, so if we were to do what we're doing now, and it could potentially be $135,000 in assistance, and we would be third in line to be paid back,
Yes.
who's the first then?
First mortgage lender.
But the 135,000 is a 0% loan.
So the first mortgage lender would provide their amount, and then we as the county would provide us our amount. We do a forgivable loan, but then it needs to remain affordable for up to 30 years. And then this $35,000 potentially would be on top of that. We would not set the terms with regards to the Hometown Heroes program. The state would do that, as you mentioned, 0% up to $35,000, but theirs is going to be repaid at some point. Even if they live in the home 100 years, it's going to be repaid, whereas ours is forgivable after 30 years. If that makes sense.
Getting closer. Thank you.
All right. So I don't have a problem with us being in third position in general because of for this program. However, I think it begs though that maybe another look at, because now we're bundling, and you say you would go up to $100,000. With this, we'll go to potentially up to $135,000. If you got the max $35,000, that means you're buying a $700,000 home. And if that's 5% of the down payment.
Not necessarily, Mayor. And again, thinking from the standpoint of the maximum home value that we can assist is $382,000.
That you can, but Hometown Heroes, if it says 5% up to $35,000, takes them into a $700,000 home.
So if it's a $700,000 home, we couldn't assist anyway.
You're not even going to be involved in it.
If the value of the home exceeds $382,194, then the state says you cannot use your SHIP funds for this purchase.
Okay. So, okay, so that makes, so we don't need to look at that. So then, so you could end up in a $384,000 home, potentially get, and max you're going to get then is 5% of the down payment, or $10,000, right? So.
Up to 35 for Hometown Heroes, yes, sir.
But for the folks that qualify for our program, we're saying a max of $384,000 for the purchase price.
The sales price, yes, sir. They can't purchase a home that exceeds that value.
Right, and that's set by HUD, or is that?
It's part of our local housing assistance plan where you can use, they'll set the price, the state does, and it's 90% of the average sales price for the area versus a housing finance authority price. So you'll have two options. This price typically gives us the better option. And with Palm Beach County being high-cost county, even on the affordable workforce housing units, this option has always been the better option.
Okay, so according to my calculations, at $384,000, the 5% down payment would be just a little over $19,000. So they could qualify for a 5% minimum $10,000, but up to 5%, which would take them up to $19,000. And then you would then apply another, up to potentially another $100,000 on that, would take them to 120 on a 384. So you're looking at about almost a 30% down payment.
Yes, sir.
If you can get everything else in line with your ratios and so forth.
Yes, sir. And if they need that much. Most people aren't using 100,000, but we do see some that come through that need
Okay,
it.
all right. I agree with Commissioner Bernard and agree that we move past this and allow it to move forward and allow our program to take effect as it does. And go into third position, and understanding that if in fact there was a default, likelihood is probably that those funds are not going to get repaid, which is a loss for us. But on the other hand, if they stay in the house 30 years, it's not getting repaid anyways. So, you know, it takes it a little sooner, but at the end of the day, if we can get more people into homes, I think that's a good thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay,
Anything?
thanks for the direction.
Anyone else?
Got it. Okay,
I'm not
so-
seeing it. Administrator, your light is lit. Is it? We're done? Okay.
She's done.
Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I just turned off my light because you said what I was going to point out, that either way, whether it is forgivable at the end, or it's not, like either way, we're not getting we wouldn't get the dollars back. So.
Okay, good. We hear you loud and clear. So we are now moving to the third section, which is land development, and we have the planning and zoning staff who will be joining Patrick at the table.
And as we're bringing up reinforcements, just a couple points to touch on. We need it for this leg. Two things. One, just kind of echoing Ms. Jack's comments earlier. In so few words in this bill, it unearths so much that is being contemplated and reviewed and will be applied. We have, our hundreds of local governments throughout the state of Florida, between the counties and cities. We have read analysis, watched a number of presentations, and there are a lot of thoughts out there. And this is going to be one of those we're going to end up having to live it for a little while as we, put it into effect. Every city, a lot of cities have a lot of different thoughts. A lot of the presentations we've seen, there are a variety of opinions on it. So we're going to share with you our position and where we are on it, knowing that it will evolve, and we're going to have to live some live ones to see some of these pieces shake out. And I just want to touch on the other point. We hit it a little bit in the presentation, but what's in the bill is just really another form of a bonus density program, which, to brag about ourselves for a little bit, we've had in place for decades. And bonus density programs that about 20 years ago, we pivoted into supporting workforce housing programs, and our TDR program was the first one, and then our workforce housing program. So a lot of what you have and here see in this bill are vestiges of things that we've been doing for a while, and that's why we have over 1,300 units of multifamily that have been created through our workforce program and getting close to 300 units for sale, whether they're occupied or under construction. So Bill does have a lot of potential, but there are a lot of things that this county's been doing for a long time that pairs with this. So I will stop now and hand it over to Whitney to walk you through the easy part of everything.
Thanks, Patrick. I'll reiterate a little bit of that. So we're going to present to you the fun part, the development approval options that are available through the Live Local Act. And we'll provide an analysis of the key components specifically for unincorporated Palm Beach County. As you know, this legislation was adopted with the broad intent of increasing affordable housing in the state. This is a one-size-fits-all approach that does not take into account the policies and programs that have been adopted locally. Palm Beach County has been strategically and progressively planning for growth in housing since the 1980s, with the adoption of its first comprehensive plan. In 1999, we adopted the award-winning managed growth tier system, which established 5 distinct tiers, each with their own set of policies and regulations to balance land use, growth, and ensure the county's economic development. We've established overlays and special planning areas to direct higher densities to the urban areas, such as the Westgate CRA and the urban redevelopment areas. We've also established overlays and policies to protect our industrial employment base through overlays such as the United Technologies overlay, as well as others. The county has also had affordable and workforce housing, as Patrick mentioned, programs around since the 1990s. We also have underlying residential density assigned to all commercial properties that fosters redevelopment and infill development. The county has required inclusionary zoning since 2006, requiring that all residential developments with 10 units or more include a percentage of units as workforce. And most recently, the county voters approved a $200 million bond referendum for affordable housing. There are 2 distinct sections in the act that were established that established new approval methods for projects that offered a percentage of affordable housing. I'll summarize each and provide staff analysis throughout the summaries. Subsection 6 briefly is entirely subject to board approval, whereas subsection 7 is entirely administrative. I'm going to skip over subsection 6 for a moment and concentrate on subsection 7 because it has the most nuanced application. Subsection 7 applies only to commercial, industrial, and mixed-use zoning districts. For unincorporated Palm Beach County, commercial zoning is allowed in all tiers currently. For industrial, it's only allowed in the urban-suburban tier and limited with the commerce designation in the ag reserve tier. This section requires the jurisdiction to administratively approve projects proposing a minimum of 40% affordable housing with no board approval. Administrative referring was synonymous to us as requiring the project to go through the development review officer process, which involves approximately 17 agencies reviewing it and their applicable land development regulations. The county would require 40% to include all 4 affordable income ranges equally as defined by the state. Administrative review would mean no public hearing and no board action. Affordable housing developments allowed under this preemption are entitled to build multifamily, rental, or mixed use in commercial or industrial zones without a zoning or land development change. They're allowed to utilize the highest allowed density on any land in the local government where residential development is allowed. They're also allowed to utilize the currently allowed height for commercial or residential development within 1 mile of the proposed development or 3 stories, whichever is higher. Then this slide is actually the specific language from the statute, which we've highlighted the fact that the project does still need to meet our land development regulations, and it also needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, with the exception of provisions that establish densities, height, and land use. The maximum density for these projects is the maximum density of the jurisdiction. For unincorporated Palm Beach County, our highest density future land use designation is 12 units per acre. This density is not currently allowed outside of the urban-suburban tier, but would now apply throughout all tiers. The maximum height is the maximum currently allowed by the jurisdiction, or 3 stories, whichever is greater. For unincorporated Palm Beach County, our regulations are typically 35 feet or 3 stories. These developments must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The key goals, objectives, and policies that would be analyzed would include the overlays and economic development policies that protect industrial lands, as well as our existing workforce housing requirements that would apply to any proposed density that goes above 12 units per acre. Also, in the ag reserve, our preserve requirements would still apply. This map is a map that shows multiple items that we thought would be of interest to this discussion. And you all have copies of also in front of you. And you also have copies of maps that just show the industrial lands within Palm Beach County. The map up on the screen shows the tiers of our managed growth tier system, and it shows the significant overlays as they have been developed in the county. And it shows existing commercial and industrial parcels, all identified in red. The next slide is what we're looking at is the applicability currently in the county, where it shows the commercial industrial future land use and where currently commercial and future land use and industrial land use is allowed. Nearly all tiers allow commercial zoning, whereas industrial is limited to the urban, suburban, and commerce in the ag reserve. Currently, the 12 units per acre density is not allowed outside of the urban, suburban tier. The statute defines affordable housing as the following 4 categories, ranging from 30% to 120% of the area median income, which is the household income, as compared to our workforce housing program categories, which range from 60% to 140%. We require, through our workforce housing program, that these units also be distributed across all 4 categories. In 2022, our Palm Beach County AMI was $90,300. It's projected in 2023 to be $98,300. Our multifamily rents in our workforce housing program are defined by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. The rents under Live Local are yet to be determined. This is a comparison chart of basically the area median income identified within the Live Local statute in comparison with the county's workforce housing program. The statute identifies affordable housing ranges much lower than the county's workforce program. This is our workforce housing rental rates and income eligibility figures based on the 2022 AMI. And it shows the 4 main categories as well as each subcategory. In addition, we've highlighted some other interesting statistics that we thought would be pertinent to this discussion, pointing out that the 2020 census noted that there were a total of 595,447 total households in the county. Interesting about that number is that nearly half of those were single-person households. Other relevant household income statistics that align with statistics or the state's affordable housing categories are that households making less than $25,000 accounted for 17.2% of households, and those making 25 to 50% accounted for 18.7% of households, and those making $50,000 to $100,000 accounted for 28.8% of households in the county. And combined, that's about 64% of our households and their incomes. Now I'll switch over to subsection 6, which some of you may know that it formerly was House Bill 1339. It was incorporated into the Live Local Act, and it has, in this 2023 amendment, it eliminated the potential for this to be used on residential zone properties. It now only applies and is applicable to commercial and industrial zoning districts, or properties zoned industrial or commercial. It's self-executing. It does not require an ordinance to implement it. Unlike the subsection 7 that I just discussed, it requires the local government to approve it. This section is purely at the board's discretion, whether or not to approve it or to even allow these projects to come before you. The board may approve any multifamily or mixed-use project regardless of the regulations. What to apply for maximum density, height, land development regulations, et cetera, are completely up to the board. And it only requires 10% of those units be affordable housing. So our analysis of this is that the goal of the Live Local Act is to increase the supply of affordable housing. For unincorporated Palm Beach County, subsection 6 is in conflict. It's contrary to the intent of what it would be to allow for workforce housing units, or it would be less than workforce housing units that are currently that are currently required or allowed under our current policies, while reducing the county's employment base. For density increases that come to you by a future land use amendment, planning staff recommends 25% be affordable for multifamily. Projects allowed under subsection 6 would result in a 15% net loss of workforce or affordable housing units. Considering the other workforce density bonus programs in place, the ability of commercial properties already to utilize underlying density, and the need to preserve our industrial lands for a strong economy, the small return of 10% affordable housing does not make sense for unincorporated Palm Beach County. So in conclusion, I'll just do a quick summary of the two subsections. Subsection 7 is a completely administrative approval through our zoning division. That's where it would come through. And subsection 6 would be approval would be at the discretion of the board. Subsection 7 requires consistency with the comprehensive plan, except for where it establishes use, density, and height, where subsection 6 is up to the board. Land development regulations would apply for subsection 7, except as far as use, density, and height, and subsection 6 is, again, at the discretion of the board. The eligible zoning districts for subsection 7 are commercial, industrial, and mixed use, and subsection 6 are only commercial and industrial. The housing types that would be developed under subsection 7 are multifamily or mixed use development, and the same goes for subsection 6. The types of housing units developed under subsection 7 are limited to rental, where subsection 6 could be rental or for sale units. Subsection 7 requires that 40% of the units be affordable and restricted for 30 years, and subsection 6 requires only 10% of those units be restricted, and it does not define for how long. So I hope this provided a good review of the act and how we see it being applicable to unincorporated Palm Beach County and some of the things that we are already doing currently. And of course, we're here to answer any questions that you might have and for further discussion. And of course, I have Lisa Amara, the zoning director, and Kevin Fisher, the planning director, to answer any specific questions on those topics. And Scott Stone, county attorney.
All right, thank you. I'm sure you're going to have some questions. Commissioner Marino, you're recognized.
This has to do with height. So what you're saying is maximum of 3 stories, because that's what the residential maximum height is?
We highlighted that because that's what our typical height requirement, I mean, that's what our standard requirement is. But it does say that it's with whatever is within 1 mile of the property being developed.
But what you're doing though is if it's in a commercially zoned piece of land right now, commercial, you can go higher than 3 stories or 35 feet.
No.
Pretty much 35 feet is our standard height. We have, remember a couple months ago, we had our presentation on the zoning regs.
Flat roofs and-
We're extremely suburban in our county with our zoning regs, and typically it's 35 feet. And there is the ability to go higher when you have a bigger setback. The further you set back, the higher you can go.
Okay, so then this is just protecting the 35 feet, and unless, of course, somebody within a mile of you is 50 feet.
You still, for the subsection 7, the one that has to meet zoning regs, they would have to meet zoning regs. And it's very difficult to get higher than 35 feet with high density. I mean, it's difficult to get the 12 units per acre and the 35 feet if you want to go higher because of the parking regs. And that is something that the parking regs will apply for. That's option 7, the administrative one. But theoretically, with a large enough property where they could put the structure set back further from the edges, theoretically, they can go higher than 35 feet.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bernard, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the height, what if the 1 mile radius is within a municipality and not the county? And how do you address that? Is it only within
Local jurisdiction.
the local
Same,
jurisdiction?
yes.
Okay, perfect. My other question is, which is on slide 20, on page 21, it says the statute defines affordable as up to 120% of the AMI. With the state defining it as up to 120% of the AMI, wouldn't that mean that more projects who are most likely workforce now would qualify for exemption, tax exempt?
I guess that potential always exists, but I'll take that a step further as we would look for it to be spread amongst all the income categories under the affordable definition. You're getting into lower tiers and having other potential exemptions. One of those, we'd have to see what levels they hit in a project and see what they're eligible for.
No, but I'm just thinking the current projects that exist now, let's say you have
Current ones?
yeah, current ones, you know, that probably wouldn't be, there probably would be, because the affordable, I believe, is up to 80% right now. With the state increasing it now to 120%, wouldn't that mean that those other projects could now get exempt, tax exempt for those units?
I think that potential exists, yes, certainly for projects, and there were a minimum number on the percentage as well that applied. So our newer ones where the board has placed the 25% requirements, I think those potentially could fall into that area, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor, you're recognized.
In the subsection 6 analysis that you were describing, it is in conflict with unincorporated areas of the county. So it would actually not provide for greater workforce housing in our unincorporated areas. Is that sort of the gist of what you're saying?
Correct.
Now, can we, and I think this is for the lawyer, can we add to this law? We can't be in conflict with it, but can we add requirements for developers to provide workforce housing in unincorporated areas? If we know.
Sure. I think you were talking specifically about subsection 6.
Yes, sir.
Because that's completely up to the board's discretion. It's not something that you have to approve. And so if you establish procedures or requirements associated with that, consistent with our comp plan and state law, then you could certainly add additional layers of requirements and regulations to that if you moved forward with that.
In effect, we can provide additional objectives or requirements for workforce housing in unincorporated areas of the county.
Right. The law only states that you may approve something if at least 10% of the units are affordable on industrial, commercial, and mixed-use zone properties. So the mechanism for doing that and the additional application or regulation requirements are up to you if you were to.
Good.
Yeah.
Didn't want you to go too far, because once I got my right answer, I wanted to end it right there. So that's good, that's good. Now, the next question comes down to, if we do allow county regs for unincorporated areas, then can we also pull in state funds to help fund these workforce housing units in the unincorporated areas of our county? And maybe that goes to the attorney.
I think we could.
Why not? Why can't we ask them for the money?
Yeah.
It's state, I mean, we all pay state taxes, and if we have the authority and the ability and the opportunity to put workforce housing close to the areas that need it in our unincorporated areas, I don't see any prohibition against asking for state funds to help us promote that.
Vice Mayor, I'll answer, and I would agree, there's nothing that would preclude us from asking. I would just point out again, so as we look at the provisions here in 7, always remember 60% of the project's going to be market rate still. So these are not 100% workforce projects or affordable projects by the state definition. So these are the ones that would be coming in that otherwise would be the typical ones that you might see on Thursdays, sort of thing, albeit with a little higher number under the affordable definition. But the opportunity to ask and seek additional funding, there's nothing that precludes that.
Would we be able to have an answer to that before we actually take a vote on this or move forward on county additional regs? Is that something that we could do? Maybe Ms. Baker, maybe I'll direct this to you. Can we request from the state a direction on being able to pull down state funds for because for additional workforce housing in unincorporated areas, because it is all meeting the state incentives for workforce housing. Could we do that?
I think, Jonathan, I don't know if he's still here, but we do receive our allocation of state funding, the SHIP and all those dollars. I had the pleasure of going up during committee meeting week with Todd and Commissioner Bernard, and we actually spoke to the Senate President on this issue because we had our $200 million that our voters voted for.
Sure.
And if there could be a separate pot of money that we could leverage those dollars against. She referred us, she didn't want us double dipping, that's the first thing, but the second thing was she referred us to the Director for Housing Finance Corporation. We did have a couple of conversations with him, so we will continue. We have not gotten a yes to just because you got a separate pot of money, you're going to get even more. But we're pushing that envelope and we are asking so we can leverage more dollars.
The reason I find it interesting is that we're going to have two levels here now. This has created a disparity in the amount of money that that developers can pull in for workforce housing, and that will be in industrial and and non-residential properties. They will be able to pull in state funds, but in the unincorporated areas that are residential, which could be mixed use, in which we may want to have some element of workforce housing, they will only be able to pull in county funds, or at least they won't be able to pull in major state funds. Am I wrong in this?
Yeah, they're
can
still
they?
all eligible.
On this, even though
They're
under
private
subsection
property.
6?
It's all private property owners, and they can,
Yeah.
of course, apply for these programs that are available.
Okay.
If we are partnering with the private entity that's doing the job, we put out our RFPs, they bid on them, developers bid on those RFPs, we bring it to the board, you approve those projects. Those projects are funded with state dollars, SHIP funds that come down. And so with those dollars, yeah, we're still eligible no matter where they are in the county. We receive SHIP funds for the unincorporated area, and a number of municipalities will fall under our umbrella for those particular dollars. And we currently do that. We also match our dollars in order to leverage them with municipalities that have their own
Right, I understand,
entitlement.
right.
And so we leverage those dollars. This board has worked with us as well. We've got about $10 million in a housing pot that gives us a little more flexibility if there are projects that we want to give dollars to help with gap financing, even outside of the bond dollars.
Very good. Okay, so there won't be a conflict between unincorporated and...
No.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question on subsection 6, it would lower the requirement to 10% workforce housing. And so we have an option then to keep what we have. Right now, we have it at 25%, right? Do we have the option to keep this? Yes. Okay, so this is a change that we would have to make, and otherwise we can keep it at 25. I just want to clarify on that.
Yes, I want to be clear on the 25% that applies. Board has traditionally applied that as a condition on a comp plan amendment. If it's just a zoning change going through, the traditional percentages in the workforce program apply, 8-10%-ish. But comp plans is when we hit with that higher requirement.
So then with subsection 6, if they're not trying to achieve a density bonus, then we would still get the 10%?
Well, the way we understand it is that they could just show up here at Matters by the Public and request that you approve their project with no review, no nothing, just we want to do this project on this piece of property, and we want to give you 10% affordable, we want to make 10% of those units affordable. And you, as the board, have the discretion to say, sounds great, let's do it. That's really how it reads to us. So we don't recommend that because we think that it's in conflict with what we already would allow through our processes that are already in place that would yield much more affordable housing than that type of project without any type of review or regulatory,
I was going to say, they could do that without going through all the departments for fire rescue and traffic and everything that is required now. They
That
could
is
skip
the
that.
interpretation of the statute. However, as staff, I think the legislature wrote this one-size-fits-all for all of the jurisdictions in the state. And Palm Beach County is at the forefront of affordability and workforce housing, and also policies and objectives to protect our economic development and our industrial land. So for us, as the zoning director staff recommendation, even personally, to put our industrial and tax base at risk for only a 10% workforce or affordable unit doesn't seem to be putting it on even footing with our traditional residential development, where if it's a future land use change, we have to ask for 25%, or the density bonus programs, we have a percentage. And taking into account that the negativity that residential can bring into an industrial area, where suddenly the code violation calls are going to happen, because some of our industrial areas have uses that are not compatible with residential, which is why if you look on the map, most of our industrial areas are kind of clustered. The commercial areas are scattered in little tiny bits all over, but we've got some major industrial centers that, from a staff perspective, we don't see the benefit of using this tool in the toolkit compared to our other mechanisms, because we have places like the URA, the unincorporated redevelopment area, where we have a density pool where we want higher densities, Westgate CRA, where they're doing lots of wonderful density increases. So we're not seeing the benefit for the county for 10% affordable compared to the loss of or the negative impacts on industrial lands. So that's why and the other option too is that that interpretation of option 6 says that the zoning regs don't apply, or the comprehensive plan doesn't apply, and they can just go straight to asking, and staff couldn't support that when option 7 lets you meet the zoning regs and has the 40% of the workforce required. So.
Okay, so that brings me to my question about industrial, because industrial land is scarce and valuable in this county. And I know that we do have some overlays. I looked at the map. The overlays would protect these areas from either subsection. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so as the statute is written, for subsection 7, you still have to abide by the local government's comprehensive plan with the exception of use, density, and height. So a few weeks ago, I was in a meeting that the Florida Housing Coalition put on for questions, and the iParks, all the municipalities were there. So I've asked that question, stating that we have certain overlays within our comprehensive plan. So for instance, the Palm Beach International Approach Overlay. That's an area where we do not want to direct residential development due to the flight paths. And they said, yes, environmental type overlays of that nature are still applicable, so you can use those to restrict where projects would be eligible to utilize this statute.
So even in areas that we don't necessarily have an overlay, is there any input that we would have that it would not be the best place to put housing? I mean, we don't want people moving into an area where the trucks are beeping all night, or, it's not conducive to a happy living environment. Do we have any say to kind of point out these areas that would not be good for people to live?
I think any proposal that's coming forward, Lisa and zoning staff and planning would have to have that initial meeting with the applicant, and that's where we would assess what's being proposed, where is it being proposed, and what if potentially is that in conflict with any provisions of the comprehensive plan.
And so if they do get approved, then we would lose that area as an industrial.
Yes.
Because you're not having industrial and people live on top of it, right? I mean, we're losing that.
Yes, and we do have policies and objectives in the comp plan that talk about economic development and the importance of preserving our economy. We have one of the largest counties, east of the Mississippi, an extremely diverse amount of lifestyles. The Everglades agricultural area, 400,000 acres of agriculture. We have major economic base. We have tourism, we have residential, we have rural, we have exurban. So, it's been a challenge for the county to prioritize economic development and preservation of industrial lands. That's why any of under 7, where it's an administrative approval and they have to meet the comprehensive plan, that's where Kevin, we will look at these projects and see if we can make a finding that they're consistent or not.
Okay. And sorry, one more question, please. You didn't talk about it, but I know when I read, there's expedited permitting for this. How are we prepared for, I believe it's 10 days for some of this. It's much quicker than, which I understand would be helpful, but is it doable? And, how, do we need more staff? What are we looking at?
The way we understand it is the expedited permitting is what we come to understand is if it's 65% or more affordable housing, if that project is. Okay. So we do have actually systems in place that are being worked on to make that allowance in the building division. So we have to talk about that with the development and review side, but it's definitely working. We're working on that.
Thank you. Administrator, do you want to be recognized?
Just want to put a caveat on that. We are working on it. However, the caveat is that application needs to come in complete, and it needs to have all the information in order for us to meet those deadlines. But if it doesn't come in complete, we won't come anywhere near that. So again, I just want to put that caveat on it. We're trying to make those deadlines, but if it is not a complete application, we can't review it and get it through the system.
And I think we have talked internally that we would require a mandatory pre-application meeting on these projects.
All right, Commissioner Baxter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just trying to get some clarification. Are we deciding between 6 or 7? Is the builder deciding between 6 and 7? When they're coming and they're going to establish which one applies? Who is that?
Well, this is how we see things working. So number 7 is the administrative approval one, and anytime someone wants to apply for a public hearing application, one of those applications that ends up before the board, we require a mandatory pre-application meeting where we sit down with them and then we talk about what they want. If there's density and intensity, we include planning, land development, traffic. So how we're envisioning is that someone would meet with zoning and planning and have one of these pre-application or kind of an exploratory meeting on looking at the options. And we would lay out, okay, under the normal process, this is how much density you can yield, and this is how the approval process would work. A lot of our commercial properties, for example, have an underlying residential density. So it might be in their favor not to use option 7, which is the administrative approval, versus using the underlying density that's already there. So they would come in and we would look, and we would say this is how many workforce would be yielded or affordable, or the strategies and the process and the timing. And we anticipate that they would say either, okay, let's use option 7, and we would process them administratively if it met the statute, or we would do a public hearing application if that yielded a better benefit for the applicant. Or they might say, you know what, we don't want to. We want to do option 6, and we only want to do 10%. And we would say, okay, go to the board by matters of the public and present that to the board. And we would probably articulate that we couldn't support for whatever reason, and probably because the 10% is a lot lower than in the traditional methods for our density figures or for option 7 percentage. And they would bring it to the board, and if the board just said, hey, this is a great project, we would like to not abide by fire rescue, water utilities, land development regs, traffic, parks, and we would want to do this project for 10% affordable housing in industrial and commercial. And if the board looked at that and said, hey, yeah, staff go work with them, then we could provide a critique of what that meant and do some work with the applicant. But ultimately, it would be the board decision, but not that staff would likely support that, because we, like I said, this is just one tool in the toolbox, and we think that our existing tools are superior to this one.
And if it's okay, Mayor, what does it currently cost an applicant to come before the board?
It varies. Actually, it could vary from one of the very large, for example, AGR PUDs, which is doing a major shift up, change up. It could be very expensive. A smaller one, such as limited pet boarding, or a smaller application will have much less fees. But there's also fees with the agent as well on top of that. So there's our fees that we charge, and then they have to get a surveyor and a traffic engineer and all those fees on top. So I can't quite estimate, but it's not cheap.
Do we have a low and a high range?
Well, it could be as low as $5,000 to $6,000 for, I think the pet boarding ones that come through, but they can be upwards of $50,000 worth of fees.
And so, but by allowing them to come to matters by the public, they don't have to pay that fee?
Well, they would get board direction, and then I would imagine you would want staff analysis, in which case there wouldn't still be a fee if we did an analysis of what the request is. We don't have a fee for pre-application meetings.
I'm not sure what it would look like on the building permit side, so, once they went to build it, and the infrastructure and impact fees. Oh, I'm just not sure how it would look on the impact fee and building permit side and all those things. Of course, those would be required.
One of the things that was important to me, that you are well aware of, I believe by now, is our process, simplicity, and when it becomes so burdensome, that's when I feel like these things become a necessity to get things accomplished, such as, I don't necessarily like it, but I feel it has been derived out of making processes and policies in such a way. I mean, I think most of us, every time we turn around, we're hearing some other place that just doesn't quite work. And I think it was the mayor who had already said we're kind of currently starting to look at those policies and the building policies. And if we're going to have to live with the Live Local Act now, I would really like to use it as an opportunity, if possible, to maybe look at expedited permitting, maybe not just in this one little window, but create something, whether it's software, a program, use technology to try to help our residents and to try to make that work. Like, this is a great time because we're already in flux to try to, I think, help more residents. I would love to hear, maybe if the board would be in favor of trying to look at some policies to expedite some of these processes. I mean, obviously not big commercial and industrial, but maybe even some simple things. It seems so burdensome. And I would just really love to take this opportunity to try to do it all at once instead of doing it for this and then doing it for that later. Thank you.
One thing, if I may, on the fees, we do have a comprehensive plan policy that directs reduced or eliminated fees for workforce and affordable housing. So we have been applying that for some of our smaller affordable and workforce projects that have come forward.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify, so if there's an overlay in place that does protect that those industrial properties?
Correct.
Yeah. Good. I think, it's, obviously the intent of this is admirable, right? Trying to get more workforce and affordable housing. I think subsection 7 is probably the one that's going to be, we're going to have to watch and see. I know my understanding is there's no exemption for historical properties, so if somebody wanted to tear down historical properties and rebuild on that site with affordable housing, there would not be, there's no exemption for that. Is that correct?
Unless it's a designated I would think if it's a designated landmark or something, then they might not be able to, but I don't know. We'd have to look into that. but-
Okay, if you want to, if you can look into that, that would be, I think that's going to be valuable to know. What, and then in mix, if you were to do, let's say on a commercial property, you wanted to do mixed use, and how would the parking requirements then go to whatever our building code says is required, or how would that work?
All of the parking standards apply. There is a provision in the statute that says if you're within a distance of a major transit stop as defined by the land development regulations, we could consider reductions in parking, but our parking is very high. Our parking requirements are quite high. So a lot of the projects that come before you, they've already received a 15% reduction by an administrative waiver, and this doesn't guarantee that for these projects. And some, what I would anticipate is that a lot of projects that would want to do mixed use would hit a wall with our parking requirements, and then they would need a variance. So that is something that that's very peculiar with the drafting of this legislation, because it says we can't make you do a variance. We can't make the applicants do a variance. However, they have to meet the parking, but they might end up having to need a parking variance at the zoning commission anyway, because to do mixed use, unless you build a parking garage, our standards are quite high.
And it does require for mixed use that it has to be 65% multifamily in that mixed use.
And
That's
then as it relates to the traffic impacts, is there a standard when whether it's commercial or industrial, do they have to meet some kind of a road capacity standard? Is that?
For option 7, it'll be the standard regular traffic requirements that we do for the TPS traffic concurrency for all projects.
For multifamily, right?
At the multifamily rate. But at the, for option 6, the one with the 10%, it allows you to exceed traffic capacity.
And what about concurrency for schools and parks and those sorts of things?
That would all apply for option 7.
That would apply for option 7?
Yes. So they would come through. The only thing different with option 7 with one of these projects is that it would be commercial or industrial zoning, and staff would do the DRO review as if it was 12 units per acre, and they would meet with all of the 17 DRO agencies. Drainage would apply, parks requirements would apply, parking, everything. All the rules would apply with 7. The only thing that wouldn't happen is, this is it's a change in use, and a lot of folks, we have public hearings every fourth Thursday where folks are coming out and they're speaking on projects. That part would be eliminated with option 7, and it would only be staff.
Could they develop as a PUD, or how, or would just develop?
They would probably utilize the RM, the residential multifamily zoning standards, because that's what the statute says. You pretend that commercial or industrial parcel has the same zoning regs as multifamily, which for us is residential multifamily, RM zoning district. So we would apply those standards, those setbacks, those heights, those parking requirements, and everything for the uses that are proposed.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, okay, I see, let's see, I see our attorney has a comment. I hope I didn't step on something or step into something.
No, I just wanted to give you an answer to the question about the historical properties. In my opinion, the historical ordinance would still apply, even if they were coming in under subsection 7. Because it's not one that deals with what are the 3 key words here? Density, height, or land use. So they would not just be able to willy-nilly demolish a historical structure under this statute.
Thank you. And all right, Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you. Two more quick questions. I know what's been listed, parking requirements and others. As far as setbacks, buffers, all of those types of issues, do we lose all say in that, and the public as well?
For option 7, for subsection 7, they apply, but not for 6.
Yeah, echoing Lisa's point, it's in an industrial area, you'd apply the standards for multifamily, so they still have to meet all those requirements. Should they not? Should they need a variance? Should it trip a conditional use, some other things? That aspect of it would still need to go forward, but those are the standards they would apply.
So those standards are, those are by our managed growth tier as far as the setbacks and that, or is that just across the board uniform in the county?
Setbacks, buffers vary by when two uses next to each other. So, you know, if it was a commercial property and you're developing it residentially, the buffer and the setback around the edges would depend on what's adjacent to that property. So we might require an incompatibility buffer of 20 feet then, whereas if it was multifamily next to multifamily, you might have the 8-foot buffer. So it would vary. Whatever the code applies, as if it was multifamily is how we would treat it.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, I'm not sure if this is in your department or if this is just overall in the bill, but it does talk about ecological preservation areas, conservation lands. And I know, like, even in some of our industrial overlay, we have conservation lands within, because this county, you have wetlands all over the place. How is that taken care of in this bill?
Under 7.
The standards still apply in 7. Yes, all of our standards in our land development regulations would continue to apply.
So in your opinion, are we overall, because our plan is pretty complete, are we in good shape to kind of take what's coming with this and not necessarily be rocked by undesirable development?
From the pure developing any given piece of property, you have good standards that are in place. This bill opens up on the height and opens up on the density piece of it. We otherwise have, yes, very good pieces in place. It does trip into what we started on earlier of losing industrial land, job-producing land that are long-term plays. These don't turn over quickly. They're held as industrial for a long, long time till the right uses come along and a property owner exercises that. But they could move a lot more quickly, and then it sets us up with, you've got an apartment complex wedged between two industrial pieces of property, and you've taken that industrial off the books forever then. So that aspect of it is a challenge, but I think when you're developing any given piece of property, we're comfortable that property, you've got good standards in place.
Okay, so as I understand it, they're already working on a glitch bill. Hopefully, the industrial part of that is top of the list. So, thank you.
Glitch bill.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see any. It's, I mean, this is obviously, you guys did a great job in trying to educate us and the public on the Live Local Act, and I'm sure there's going to be more to be learned as time goes on, but appreciate this initial workshop on it. It is now almost 12:15. I think it's a good time to break for lunch, and we'll finish up after lunch. Why don't we take a break for an hour and 15 minutes, or let's say an hour and 17 minutes, be back here at 1:30. Okay. So we are in recess.